Hi there, this is Daisy Smith. I am going to talk you through how to create a 3D pencil drawing. So you're going to need a range of drawing materials. So we need pencils that range from 2B up to 4B or 6B. Here I've got an 8B as well, just for the really dark areas. You also need a good rubber and a pencil sharpener. On the left here, on the pink paper, I've started a keywords list. So as I go through the exercise, I'll be adding the key terminology to the list. So as I do something, we'll add the word down and students will be able to see where those key elements of the exercise are. To begin with, I'm going to use a 2B and a 3B, mostly 2B, just to start off with the gentle outline. 2B is our lightest tone. Good way of getting students to draw a circle rather than just going straight in is to hover the pencil above the page and to trace with their hand the idea of a circle. When they see with their eye that their hand is making a circle, then they can go ahead and press down with their pencil. So once we've warmed up and practiced our circles, we can go ahead and do a slightly larger one. Same technique, trace the outline before you push your pencil down and commit to the shape. And the first thing we want to do is to add a light source. Now this tells us where the highlight will sit on the sphere and also where the shadow will sit. So I'm going to add those to the list. So these are our first important words. So our light source is the first thing we need to consider before we can start making this circle look three-dimensional. So because I know that the light source is coming from that top right, directly opposite, you're going to have the darkest point. And on the top is going to be our highlight, so I'm going to trace the area in which the highlight will sit. So that is going to be our lightest tone. I'm going to put shadow and highlight in there. So these are the second thing that we need to consider. Once we've got a light source, trace in those areas of dark and light. So the next thing we need to consider before we start shading is our tonal scale. So this will tell us exactly the values that we need to replicate in our sphere, going from our lightest possible tone to our darkest possible tone. So I've drawn some squares here, and I'm going to go from my lightest, so pressing really lightly with my pencil, creating two midtones, and adding the most amount of pressure for my dark tone. For younger students, I would encourage them to try using a bar scale. This allows them to practice going gradually from the darkest tone to the lightest tone by gradually adjusting the pressure on their pencil. At this point, we've set up our sphere ready to go in and start shading. So you've added your light source, you've plotted your highlights and your shadows, and you've created a tonal scale for reference. At this point, I'd remind students to sharpen their pencils as well, because they would have gone blunt when we were creating that tonal scale. First, I'm going to demonstrate on one of the first practice circles we did how not to approach a three-dimensional drawing with pencil. So I've just plotted my light source, highlights and shadows, and then I'm going to directly translate this tonal scale onto the circle. And you'll see that because those lines are only going in one direction, it creates a very flat and one-dimensional shape. So instead, the trick is with how we hold our pencil. So we want to change the grip to an overhand grip, which allows us to use the side of the pencil more than the tip. So I'm going to go straight in to our main sphere, going from dark to light with the side of my pencil. And using the side of the pencil, you can pull those lines round in a nice curve, and we call these contour lines. Now these help to guide your eye with the pencil marks to give the impression of a rounded shape. As you can see, using the side of the pencil creates much softer, hazier marks, so we have to work quite hard to gradually build those up. I like to go in with one of probably the second to lightest mid-tone across the majority of the sphere, because that's a nice base to build on. Now I have a nice base layer that I can work back into that is gradually, very lightly going from dark to light. I've swapped from a 2B to a 3B just to make those darks more intense, and I'm going to do the same thing again using the side of the pencil, gradually pulling it up from dark, easing on the pressure to bring it to the lightest point. As I make my way round the shape, I'm making sure just to pick out the edges of that sphere to really define them. Also adjusting the grip on my pencil, the angle of my hand, to make sure that I'm working those lines in the right direction. I'm going to think about using my rubber now just to neaten up the edges. So just to remove those lines from the highlight where I initially plotted them. And I'm going to go back in and add some more contour lines. But just note that they are coming from the other direction because they're coming from the opposite side of the sphere. So I've just adjusted the angle of my hand to bring those lines to meet the lines coming from the side of the sphere we're looking at. We're almost finished. I'm just going back in now, really picking out those dark shadows. I've used my darkest pencil here, this is an 8B. And I'm using that to kind of blend all of those gradual tones together. So our final step now is to add a shadow, and this will really bring our sphere to life. So I'm doing a nice long cast shadow. This is coming from the back side of the sphere, opposite to the light source. We don't want the shadow to be rounded, we want it to be long and drawn out, although within that we will create the impression of a rounded sphere shaped shadow. So we're going to start from the very bottom of the sphere, pulling our shadow out, so going from the darkest to the lightest, easing up on the pressure as we have done, using the side of the pencil so we get a nice hazy shadow, and gradually going up to that lightest point. I'm going to go back in and create a very, very subtle little half moon shape with my shadow. So round those sides closest, I'm just going to pull in and do a few smaller lines. And there we have it. That's how you create a three-dimensional sphere in pencil.